Welcome to the Churchosity Podcast. If you're looking for a place to have fun and edifying conversations about church culture, then you have landed in the right spot. What's up, everybody? My name is Heath Brady.
And I'm Andrea Brady.
And we are your Churchosity Podcast personnel. Coming at ya!
Once again.
We failed our listeners, Andy.
How so?
We forgot to inform them that we were taking a week off again.
I know.
It was somewhat unexpected.
I know.
But with all of the preparation and excitement and build up for the ordination, it was kind of difficult to literally have my mind in the right place.
Exactly.
And probably you too, although I don't speak for you.
No, but yeah.
Yeah, we were not like there.
We had to be there mentally somewhere else. We couldn't be present here at Churchosity in the recording studio. So
that is correct.
And our listeners deserve only the best.
Only the best quality content. That is correct.
We got to bring our A game.
Every time.
That's right.
No slouching.
Nope.
Well, it's been a fun week, though.
It sure has, or I should say Pastor.
I prefer His Most Holy Reverend. Thank you very much. No, all jokes aside, the ordination was Sunday, July 14th. Mm-hmm. It was such a beautiful service.
It was.
Great time.
Like, wow. It was a long service.
It was, but it didn't feel like it. Yeah.
No, it was great.
Yeah, I think the service altogether was like an hour and 40 minutes. Mm-hmm. No, actually, maybe it might have been closer to 2 hours.
Yeah,
but it sure didn't feel like it.
No.
It was a very... You'd have thought we rehearsed it. Because everything just flowed. And it just went so good. Pastor Jim did a great job. I'm so thankful for him presiding and over my ordination and putting his hand on my head and praying for me. And Pastor Jody and her husband Chad and our friends Daryl and Patricia all came down from Oregon. Mm-hmm. So it was fun. The kids watched it live via YouTube.
We had lots of YouTube watchers.
The YouTubians. Yeah, it was a good time. Mm-hmm. Really, really good time. And I think that I've rewatched the video 3 or 4 times now. Wow,
that's awesome.
Well, it's, as far as ministry is concerned, it's kind of one of the most important days.
It really is, yeah.
And now it lives forever on the internet. But after watching the video so many times, Andy, one thing is abundantly clear.
What?
And I need everyone on the same page here.
Okay, what?
Red is still a good color on me.
It was a good color, yes.
One of our kids said, "Love the red," because it pops.
Yeah,
right?
The red stole against the white alb.
Yes. But yeah, this week I got to do my first full liturgical service. Mm-hmm. And it was good. We had good time at church.
It was fun.
Excellent time at church.
Yeah.
Happy that all of the nervous tension is behind us now.
Yeah, exactly.
All of that emotional and spiritual and mental preparation for the ordination
tiring.
And everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of naps lately. A lot of naps. Well, Andy, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm happy to turn my attention to the podcast again.
Yes.
Speaking of, we have a new Patreon.
We do. So this guy is he's not really a new listener anymore, but he's been marathoning our episodes. He's new in the sense that he is a new Patreon. He's a huge supporter. He's a good buddy of mine. I've had really great conversations with him the last couple of weeks. So we here at Churchosity wish to send a special shout out to Mr. Jeffrey Stoddard.
Woohoo!
Yeehaw!
Thank you for your support.
We thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We thank you.
Yes.
Seriously. So
Without
now
you, we couldn't do what we do.
That is correct. So now, Jeff, your name is forever etched in the hallways and the byways of Churchosity Podcast. And if you're new here and you're wondering what the heck we're talking about, well, go to our website, churchosity.com, and there you can find out all the information of how to become a Patreon supporter, which is what Jeff is a new one of those for. Mm-hmm. For about the price of a grande latte per month. So if you could get one day per month without a coffee and be a Patreon, and it comes with perks because you get early release to episodes, you get some bonus content, and once we have our official, quote unquote, official recording studio set up, we may do some live streaming events.
Ooh.
Which will be offered first access to Patreon supporters. So anyhow, Jeffrey, again, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for supporting us as a Patreon. We love you. We appreciate you. And as Andrea said, we could not do what we do without you. So on this episode, we're going to get right back into the swing of things and continue our conversation about the armor of God.
Awesome.
But before we dive into that conversation, we want to remind all of you to please give us a rating and leave us a review. Because your ratings and your reviews not only help popularize Churchosity, but they also make us a heck of a lot easier for other people to find us. And we especially want to encourage everyone to check out our website. Churchosity.com is the home for all things Churchosity. Not just our episodes.
No.
Not just YouTube links.
No.
You can become a Patreon. You can follow us on the socials. But probably, as I always like to say, the most important thing on Churchosity.com
What?
is the questionnaire.
Oh, the questionnaire.
Yes, we want to hear from our listeners.
Yes.
This is your community too.
It helps drive the direction of
It
our
really does.
podcast.
We
Yeah.
would like to know where you're at, how you feel, what you think, and if there's anything that you would like for us to discuss
Topics, etc.
on one of our episodes, we will do that.
Yep.
So think about all of those times that you have been listening to our episodes and you thought to yourself, I really wish that Heath and Andrea would talk about so-and-so. Well, we can't talk about so-and-so until you tell us so-and-so.
That's true.
So seriously though, check out churchosity.com today. Give it a gander, hang out for a while, and enjoy. That's churchosity.com. Alrighty then. The armor of God.
Ephesians chapter 6.
Ephesians chapter 6. We're talking about a fun subject. Somewhat divided in church culture as to what all of these things are or what they mean.
Oh.
And what I mean by that is that, like, different denominations kind of give these things different sorts of merit or definition or classification. You know, things that what we would say are eisegesis, like reading too much into these verses, these descriptors of what each element of armor is.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like sensationalism kind of a thing.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
And we don't do that, or we try not to,
Right.
at least on our show. We like to look at it and think about it practically, context, all of the things, right?
True. Yes.
So scripturally, we're looking at Ephesians chapter 6 from verse 10 all the way down to verse 17. So it's a good chunk of 8 verses. And on our previous episode, we kind of gave some background as to why we were having this conversation. that especially because in 2024 things are kind of crazy, and the church, we ourselves included, we need to have this conversation.
Yeah.
I really truly believe that. And leading up to this episode, I've been thinking about, because we're going to talk about two pieces of the armor on this episode. And in the aftermath of our last episode, where we really did a great job of laying the foundation and talking about girding your loins with truth, that the thing that is used to duplicate the body of Christ, to reproduce spiritually the body of Christ and grow it,
yes,
is the thing that needs to be girded to be thoroughly protected.
The truth needs to be
with the
protected.
truth, yes, with the truth, which is Jesus, the way, the truth, the life. So since our last episode and in preparation for this one, I've just been thinking about a lot of things, and these times really are crazy. And as much as we don't like to talk about politics, like, it's that time of year.
Yeah.
Like, we're gearing up, and there's a lot of moves being made right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there, with the church culture, which is what churchosity is about. Remember, it's the quality of being the church. That's what churchosity is. I find myself scratching my head at a lot of the quote unquote Christian rhetoric, especially right now, because it seems to be in not in all circles, and I won't even say in the majority of circles, but certainly in the loudest of circles right now.
Well, on social media,
the rhetoric is political.
Yeah.
And sensationalizing scriptures to support a lot of this rhetoric as well. And I think to myself, what was the first piece of armor that Paul instructs us to put on? To gird your loins with truth.
Yes.
And I see all of these things that aren't the truth. I hear all of these things. I read all of these things that are not the truth.
Yeah, and even if you were, just in our society, what we consider truth. 1 minute the newspapers say one thing. Oh, I'm sorry. The media. There is no newspaper anymore.
Yeah, what's a newspaper?
The media says one thing, and next day, no, that's not right. Then the next day, it's something else. So you can't stand firm on that, can you?
And as I said on the last episode, just this very thing, truth. You open up a huge can of worms.
Yeah.
You start talking about truth and what is true in our culture.
Yeah.
And so as Christians, that's why that first thing on the list, that first piece of armor, is so important, because it's the truth. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, there is an ultimate truth. The question is, the task at hand is, what is that truth? And it is the truth that protects the means by which we grow the church, that we grow the people of God, and defend Christ's bride from the schemes of the devil, which is what verse 11 says. That's why we put on the full armor of God. And remember, how much armor are we supposed to put on?
The full armor.
The full armor.
All of it.
And Paul says it 3 times.
Yeah.
As if to say, you forgot your shoes. Come here. That kind of
like
thing.
a kid going out to play in the snow.
Right. You forgot your mittens. You forgot your hat. Exactly.
Whoa. You need your scarf.
Yeah. So we're going to continue the conversation and move forward.
Okay.
But let's read a few verses to give us some context, shall we?
Yeah.
Ephesians chapter 6, starting in verse 10. Finally, these are the Apostle Paul's final instructions to the church of Ephesus. Be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might.
Whose might? His might.
His might. Not our own strength. Because our own strength produces things like relative truth, etc.
Yeah.
Put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle, here's the why.
The struggle's real.
The struggle is real. The struggle is not against flesh and blood. And see, that's the thing, is that so much of this rhetoric and so much of our focus, like you can't look or listen anywhere, and the focus is flesh and blood.
Yeah.
Like what's going on here.
Right in front of our eyes.
Yeah, like the book of Revelation talks about those that dwell upon the earth, or the earth dwellers, those who take pride in the fact that they have made the earth their home. And I just find myself wondering, like, do we in the church forget that we are just pilgrims passing through and the earth is not our home?
Yeah, we forget that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, sermonitis. Moving along.
But our
struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. Remember, those are all different ranks. Therefore, verse 13, take up the few pieces of armor that you feel like. No, it's therefore, because of all of that,
right.
Therefore, take up the full armor of God. How come? What's the purpose? So that you will be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything, to stand firm.
Having done some things?
Yeah, having done a couple of things.
Putting on a few pieces?
At the end of the day, after you've lived out your day, remember to put it on?
Right.
No. Stand firm having done everything. Do everything possible so that you can stand firm.
Wow.
How important is that point? Verse 14, stand firm therefore.
Repeats itself.
Having girded your loins with truth. And that's where we stopped. So as we continue the conversation, we're going to move forward, the last part of verse 14. And having, present active indicative, so it's having had put on the breast. It's like continuously putting it on.
Okay.
Having put on the breastplate of righteousness. The breastplate of righteousness. So that's like that big chunk that, like, the Roman soldiers put their fake muscular abs and everything. Right?
Right.
Because remember, Paul's chained to a centurion, and he's writing this letter, so he's looking. What does that part of the armor cover?
The heart.
Primarily, yes. The heart and some other vital organs, like the stomach and the lungs. But without the heart, you die, right? So it as it pertains to this particular piece of armor, the most vital thing that is protected, would you say, is the heart, correct?
Yeah, I would say so.
So notice what characteristic of the Christian walk the Apostle Paul uses as a metaphor for this breastplate that covers the heart.
Righteousness.
Righteousness. So that means, go with me here, Andy. That means that what keeps our hearts protected is good works, righteous deeds, correct?
No.
No, I'm being
it's
facetious.
Not what I'm thinking.
When we talk about righteousness, you know, in our vernacular, in our culture, even somewhat in the church culture, we might read this as to say righteous deeds or doing good things are what are the protection of your heart.
I see.
You and I, a lot lately, as we've been prepping for upcoming episodes for our bonus Revelation series, you have been mentioning to me several times about things that should be on the forefront of our minds and buried in our hearts. Right?
Yeah.
So if the most important aspect of our faith, which is the reproductive process of the church, is guarded with the truth, and the truth is what we should have planted in our hearts, why then would doing good works, doing good deeds, not be what protects that? Why do you think?
The very first verse you read talks about being strong in the Lord and in His strength and in His might. So it makes me think that it's not stuff that we're doing necessarily, like works, that's going to fix this problem for us.
or righteous deeds in our own strength.
Yeah, in our
Right.
own strength.
It is the Lord and the power of his might.
Yeah, and if we're protecting the heart, I know that the Bible somewhere, I can't remember where, it says that the heart can be wicked.
The heart is wicked and deceitful,
Yeah.
literally in the Hebrew, sick.
Like we can't trust it.
And the heart is wicked and evil above all things. Who can possibly know it?
Okay.
Elsewhere in the Old Testament, we're reminded just what the Lord thinks of our righteousness. Those things that we think are righteous deeds on our own.
Or like filthy rags.
Like filthy rags to him. So obviously we are not talking about the things that we conjure up or the things that we produce in our own strength.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What it reminds me of is the Beatitudes.
Oh.
Matthew chapter 5. Blessed are the so-and-sos, for they shall receive such and such, right? That's what I like to kind of flippantly call it.
Right.
You work your way down the list. You start with blessed are the poor in spirit, but you end with blessed are those who are persecuted. So it's not all good news that makes us authentically blessed, happy, fortunate, or lucky. But right smack dab in the middle of that list is blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. And when you dive into the Greek of that one beatitude in and of itself, I truly believe that the Holy Spirit had all kinds of fun when Jesus said those words. And here's why. First of all, the word there for hunger, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. The Greek word there for hunger literally needs to continuously be hungry. So it's another present active indicative verb. That's the tense. So you're always hunger. You are always hungry and you are always thirsty continuously.
Interesting.
For what? Righteousness. And you shall be satisfied. But that Greek word there for satisfied is a play on words because it actually means never be satisfied by being satisfied.
Oh.
So in our vernacular, when you transliterate the Greek of that whole entire verse, it's as though Jesus is saying, the truly blessed, happy, fortunate, lucky follower of mine is the one who is constantly hungry and constantly thirsty for my righteousness, and they are never satisfied having received too much of my righteousness.
Wow.
It's like I used to say to my kids when I coached football, can you ever be too good at football?
No.
Well, can you ever be too hungry or thirsty for Christ's righteousness?
No.
So that's essentially what Jesus is saying there. So when we look at this breastplate of righteousness, we're looking at the righteousness of Christ that in the Beatitudes, he tells people, you are authentically, fully blessed, happy, fortunate, lucky if you are never satisfied being hungry or thirsty all of the time for my righteousness. It's never enough. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
And that is the type of righteousness that is, metaphorically, what protects the heart.
So your heart is longing for Christ's righteousness.
For the people of God, yes. So
That's
there's
part of hunger and thirsting for
absolutely. You know, think of in Mark chapter 6, the story of the feeding of the 5,000. I actually just preached on this. When Jesus sees all of the people, he has compassion for them. Why? Because to them, they were like sheep without a shepherd. And the first thing he does is teaches them. He gives them the truth. These people were starving. They were famished. Not for physical food, because that actually comes later in the story. But when Jesus first encounters this mob of people, his compassion for them, his pity for them, drives him to teach them truth, to give them spiritual food, to show them what authentic righteousness is. Because up until that point, they had not been fed properly. They had not been shown or taught or trained or discipled in what Christ's righteousness, what the Lord's righteousness looks like or acts like.
Interesting.
And chances are, when you compare man's righteousness with God's righteousness, it's kind of obvious most of the time.
Yeah.
And if it isn't obvious, there's a real simple litmus test. Because I know, like some folks will be like, well, you know, I help people with this, or I volunteer at that, or I pay my taxes on time, or like all of these nice things, these good things that you should be doing as a good human. And so, like the infamous question, good people go to heaven, right?
Okay.
So the litmus test, or at least one of them, I think, is to ask oneself, this good deed that I am doing, who's receiving the kudos?
Ooh.
Who's receiving the glory for it?
Yeah.
Because anyone other than Jesus Christ, as the answer to that question, will help you determine whether or not it's his righteousness that we're seeking or our fortune and glory, if you will.
Oh, dear. Yeah.
It's intense, right?
Yeah.
What thoughts do you have about that?
Well, it made me think of Matthew chapter 6 when it talks about...
Matthew chapter 6. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it talks about, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, because you'll have no reward from your Father in heaven.
Ouch.
So
if the righteousness isn't of the Father, then neither is the reward. Wow.
And praying, all that kind of stuff.
Praying,
all the deeds that you try to do to look good.
Yeah.
That's selfish.
Yeah.
That's what pretty much all of chapter 6 talks about.
Of Matthew?
Yeah, well, the beginning of it, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's part of the all of it discourse, too. Yeah. So he said a lot in that discourse. That's why I used to think when people called that chunk of scripture, it's like Matthew 5 through roughly 8. They call it the all of it discourse. I used to think because this is where Jesus told them all of it. Right. But it's because they're at the Mount of Olives. This is why it's called the all of it discourse.
That's clever.
Yeah. It's kind of easy to fall into that trap, though. To forget that even the good deeds that we do are not for our glory. The only person who does deeds for their own glory is God.
Right.
For his own glory, his own good pleasure. Why? Because he's God and he's sovereign. So everything that happens is for his glorification. Right. And even the good deeds, and I'm not trying to say that doing good deeds is a bad thing.
Well,
please don't hear
not.
me say that. But what I am saying is, don't we as children of God, don't we as Christians, disciples of Christ, followers of the living God, don't we want to do things that are inspired by the righteousness of God rather than our own desires, our own passions, our own rewards, our own kudos, our own pats on the back? I mean, it's real easy to fall into that trap.
Yeah, and all that we do, we're supposed to be doing it to the glory of God.
Yeah, Paul said, whatever you do, even if it be eating or drinking, the two most mundane things that we do as humans, eat and drink, even do that to the glory of God. So whose righteousness is it that protects our heart?
God's righteousness.
God's righteousness. All right, should we do one more?
Okay.
All right, moving along. Verse 15. And having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. That's like a word salad.
Shod my feet.
Shod your feet.
I haven't shod my feet in a while.
Yeah. It's like strapping up your boots.
Yeah, I know. I'm just being silly.
Gotcha. Well, I don't wear boots. I rarely wear shoes even.
Shod my feet.
So you're strapping, these are like those big beefy shin guard things that covered the foot, because back in the day they wore sandals mostly in that culture, and so they have to cover up the feet because if they get hit or poked or stabbed or whatever, then you can't move. True. Right, you're down for the count. So they had that real solid, and it was like a catcher's shin guard that was like almost up to the knee and then over like the meaty part of the top of the foot. And it was a very vital piece of the armor, because without your legs, you're virtually useless in battle.
No kidding.
Right? Not too many folks have won battles laying on their back.
Right.
Last I checked.
You know what else is weird with your feet? If you ever step on like a little piece of glass, even just the tiniest little shard.
You can't put any pressure on that foot now.
You can't do anything.
Yeah. Or how about stepping on a Lego?
In the middle of the night. We all know. Well, I don't know. I know what that feels like.
So do I. I'm sure
hurts.
many of our listeners do too. Or how about stubbing your toe?
Yeah.
Anything that has to do with the feet. They're so sensitive and they're so tender.
Yeah, they are.
And that's why we wear shoes. And that's why back in the day, especially with a soldier or a centurion, that's why they shod their feet, right?
What was the thing about the Achilles? Wasn't that
That's
like
Greek mythology.
Yeah,
Achilles
but
heel.
He was shot in the.
With the
heel.
arrow, he was shot through his the back of the one part of his armor that was not covered was the back of where the Achilles heel is. Exactly. That's why we call it that.
And that incapacitated him, or
right.
did it kill him? I don't remember.
Yeah, he died from that wound. But that's Greek mythology.
I know, but I'm still pointing it out.
Absolutely, because anything to do with the feet or lower legs, and you're done. You can't do. I mean, you're just out for the count.
Yeah.
Or hangnails on your toes.
Ooch.
Ingrown
Ouch.
toenails.
Oh gosh.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Anyway, before we get too graphic, so Paul says, having shod your feet, having strapped up over your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Now this is interesting.
Yeah, it is.
As we've been kind of unpacking what this piece of armor looked like, and all of the reasons why it would be good to have your feet covered and protected, it renders you inoperative. It renders you immobile. I mean, you're checked out, right? Because of the sensitivity of it. So Paul uses this piece of the armor metaphorically for the preparation of the gospel of peace. The Greek word here for preparation literally means to be fully ready for everything. So it's kind of like that verse that says, study to show yourself approved, a workman of the Lord who need not be ashamed, having been thoroughly equipped for every good work.
Okay.
Kind of along the same lines. It's that level of preparation. But notice what the preparation is. It's not head knowledge. It's not experience. It's not who you know. It's not geography. It's not ethnicity. It's not gender. What is the preparation?
The gospel of peace.
The gospel of peace. The gospel, which brings peace. There's only one gospel that does that.
Right.
And that's the gospel of Jesus Christ, right? Paul also says in the book of Galatians that if anyone comes to you preaching a gospel other than the one that we preach to you, they are anathema. They are accursed. So think of any other form of quote-unquote good news that is contrary or contradictory to the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is the power of God unto salvation. That's like constantly walking on a bed of Legos.
Oh dear.
Cursed.
Yeah.
You can't do anything. And remember on our last episode, I mentioned that these probably aren't in any particular order of importance other than the last one, which we'll get to when we get there.
Right.
I find it interesting how these already kind of tie together, right? Because you're talking about protecting the reproduction of Christianity with the truth. So that it, just imagine if the early church forward would have adhered to these instructions to the Ephesians to gird their loins with truth, how many less schisms or divisions there would have been in the church. Because if there's one truth, and that is what we protect ourselves with, mostly, then something in there isn't true. You follow me?
Yeah.
And we're following half-truths or non-truths. And then that ties to whose righteousness? It's Christ's righteousness. So the truth produces Christ's righteousness in our lives. And because the truth is in us and our pursuit of righteousness is what is driving what's in our hearts, we therefore want to be able to be on the move, mobile with what? The gospel, the preparing with the gospel. Kind of reminiscent of the Great Commission.
Okay.
go into all the world, preach the gospel, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey all that I have commanded you. How can we go do that if our metaphorical feet are not protected by having prepared with the gospel?
That's true. Yeah.
Now, what fascinates me about this whole point is that there are pastors, because I've heard them say it to my face.
What?
There are pastors who say, well, I would think that preaching the gospel every Sunday would get boring.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
I cannot fathom that.
No.
You're telling me that the greatest act of love ever conceived of in the existence of all that has existed is ever boring to talk about?
Oh my. Well, everything, I don't know. The more I study and the more I learn and the more mature I guess I become as a Christian, the more I see the gospel everywhere. And it's like you almost want to live and breathe it.
And hear it.
Yeah.
Because, just because I'm saved doesn't mean I don't need to be reminded of what Christ did for me.
No.
Because if that was the case, throw out all of Paul's letters. Throw out Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that we read on Sunday mornings. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like, why in the world? This is the thing that Jesus invited us to do. To go and preach what? Our feelings? Our opinions?
No.
Relative truth?
No.
No. The gospel. Mm-hmm. Well, how are we to preach the gospel if we're not prepared to do it? Translation.
That's like apologetics.
Exactly. That's what I was going to speak kind of along those lines. We have to know our Bibles. We don't have to be seminary scholars.
Yep.
Certainly not. Think about this. How many of the best sermons you've ever heard preached revolved around stories of little children in the scriptures? And Jesus talks about having faith like a child.
Yeah.
That childlike faith. We don't need to be cranial brainiacs. That's what makes the gospel so beautiful. It's simple. And I say it all the time that Christianity is so simple, but we as Christians have this incredible tendency, this unfortunate propensity to make Christianity so hard to live and reproduce. But if we're girded with the truth, and we're protected by His righteousness, and we're covered, having been continuously preparing in the gospel, we're mobile and we're effective. Like we always say, what's the devil's number one goal with Christians?
Render us ineffective.
Render us ineffective. So this is the reason why we got to wear all this armor every day. Why? Because the schemes are the devil's.
Right. Trying to render us ineffective.
So this is powerful stuff. Like this, this isn't, I wish that as a kid, the Sunday school coloring books and the felt boards could have done a better job for me. But, and I believe that, I haven't cornered the market on this section of scripture. I just look at the Greek and I see what was on Paul's heart and mind when he wrote this.
Yeah.
And it's pretty powerful and provocative stuff. Could you just imagine? Because, Paul's ministry was to the Gentiles. The Ephesian church was Gentiles. But I have to wonder, like, Paul was a Jew. And I'm sure, I know for a fact that there were Jewish Christians especially that saw some of these writings. Can you just imagine him using how well or unwell it would be received that Paul's using a Roman centurion's armor as the metaphor for how best to walk and be active as a Christian?
That's pretty funny.
I see some humor there.
Yeah.
Just me. I don't know.
It's kind of interesting. Well, it's something they're very familiar with.
Absolutely.
Also, yeah.
So think about it this way. When I was in my 20s, I worked for, at the time, it was a very, very popular trucking company. And a buddy of mine who was discipling me, he would see these trucks throughout, wherever he would go on, because he was a traveling businessman. So whenever he would see these trucks everywhere he went. And every time he saw one, he nicknamed it Pray for Heath Trucking. So even to this day, if I see one of those trucks, I'm like, oh, someone's praying for me right now.
Oh, that's cute.
But along those same lines, you receive this letter from Paul.
Oh.
Every time you see a Roman centurion,
think of this.
It triggers this.
Well, that could be a cool thing, because otherwise, if they're looking at the soldiers, they might be thinking bad things, you know.
Like, you know how you can hear a song and it takes you back to a place in time?
Yeah.
Or you have certain smells and, you know, things just like transport you, right? This is in their face all the time. Every time you see someone in centurion garb, it triggers this, at least for the Ephesians.
Right.
And I just think that's cool.
That is.
That's something as practical and everyday and symbolic of something treacherous.
Yeah.
The Lord inspired Paul to use metaphorically to describe the battle that we face as Christians, what's really going on behind the scenes, and how to stand firm against them.
And that's all we have to say about that.
Thank you for listening to the Churchosity Podcast. Don't forget to leave us a rating or give us a review. On our next episode, we will be talking about the shield of faith. Over to you, Andy.
Be sure to check out our website, churchosity.com. There you can follow us on all the socials, become a Churchosity Patreon, and drop us a message and give us your feedback. Fill out that questionnaire, because we'd really love to hear from you.
Do it. And don't forget to spread the word about Churchosity Podcast by just simply telling a friend to tell a friend what we're doing here.
Yeah, let them be a part of the conversation too.
But always remember that the goal of our instruction is love.
From a pure heart.
And from a good conscience.
And a sincere faith.
So we thank you all once again for listening, and we hope to catch every single one of you on the next episode of Churchosity Podcast. Peace.